Call of Duty Vanguard has had a multitude of mixed reviews since launching, splitting the opinion of nearly everyone that's played it. Its sales have dropped a whopping 40% from Cold War last year. They're actually the lowest since COD 4 way back in 2007. Now this could have been due to the little time that they had to promote the game, as it did seem like it was announced pretty much the day before it dropped, but I'm not so sure that's telling the full story. After seeing the multiple negative reviews for the game, we wanted to go through each game mode and give you our honest thoughts and opinions with the intention of advising you whether or not to buy the game at the end. I'll be looking at campaign first, then moving on to zombies, and then rounding it all up with the multiplayer. Before we start though, if you enjoy videos like these, please do like and subscribe. We're well on our way to 1,000 subs and would very much appreciate your help to get there. Let's get on to the video. The Call of Duty campaign is something that most people pay fairly little attention to, but can always be relied upon to provide a good half day's worth of fun. Yep, that's right, it's another 6-hour round mission. Following on from Cold War and Modern Warfare, Vanguard's campaign is yet again pretty underwhelming in terms of length. Pause. With only 9 missions in total, it really was over before you knew it. A bit like Vanguard in general now I think about it. At least within those 9 missions, there are a lot of varied locations, and some really nice lighting and design. What lets them down most however is the repetitive nature of them. You're basically at a shooting range with multiple different background scenes playing out. There are a couple of missions where they try to mix up the fight mechanics, like the Battle of Midway or Operation Tonga, but actually end up just making them more messy. The absolute worst example for this is definitely the mid-air fight in the Battle of Midway. The plane is nearly impossible to control and gets very tedious very quickly. The biggest strength of the campaign comes in the acting. The very solid cast definitely helps with the immersiveness of the story. However, we don't really get to see enough of them to get invested. After playing through the first mission, you're quickly caught and thrown into a Nazi jail cell. From there, you then play through each character's backstory, but it all just feels so rushed. I'd have definitely liked to have seen more of a character arc for each person. We get told that Wade is arrogant and that Polina is stubborn, but we don't really get to witness much of it. With the extremely diverse squadron, there could have been so much more to it. For example, Arthur's struggle with being a black soldier in the 1940s, or how Polina was looked down upon for being a woman that wanted to fight. Whilst they do touch on these aspects briefly, if we'd seen them more as underdogs, then we might have actually been more invested. I appreciate you can't properly explain an entire backstory in a couple of missions, but they could have done a lot more. In Polina Petrova's story, we meet her father and then 10 minutes later are supposed to be absolutely distraught that he's been killed. I mean, at this point we may as well get a SAG cutscene for every fallen troop. Looking at the actual gameplay, it's just not great. The AI is incredibly inconsistent. One minute I'm getting crossed up by the championship winning squad of Atlanta FaZe and die instantly, and the next their controller's died and they're sprinting downstairs to get more batteries. It all just feels like a beta in my opinion. As for big moments in the story, there really aren't many. The fight with Steiner is essentially a risky game of tag, which is pretty boring and glitchy. Overall, there's not much more to say other than it's a COD campaign. The fighting is always going to be an afterthought to the cutscenes. They do need content for these adverts, you know. It's not bad for what it is, but it does feel rushed. Vanguard Zombies is fun. For 5 rounds. Once you've got through the initial challenges to unlock all the areas for each perk, there really isn't much else to do. The starting courtyard that you're dropped into is actually quite good. It's spacious and has everything you need to continuously slay waves upon waves of zombies. But this would have been great had there been other areas to move on to and explore. In Cold War we had the ability to teleport to a different realm with an entirely different map to explore. Now it's just this. You could quite comfortably fend off 100 rounds of zombies just in Stalingrad alone, if it worked like that. Another issue is that the game revolves around these challenges. You complete a challenge to unlock an area at the start, but after round 6 you're completing challenges just to progress to the next wave of zombies. It's monotonous and dull. It really does just feel like a demo of the new game, teasing you into wondering what the next stage of progression is. There have been some updates to zombies since its release, but they didn't address any of the issues that people were asking for. It added new challenges, new weapons and a new objective, which don't really add much to the mode at all. The challenges that they make you do are a nice idea in principle, but they're not executed brilliantly, especially the transmit ones, which glitch the player out whenever you go near the orb. To be brutally honest, they're just not fun. They get boring. Again, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but they could have introduced a wider variety of these challenges to spice it up a bit. Going from the Outbreak game mode in Cold War to this just feels like a big step back. The maps were huge and detailed, and the weapon and ability upgrade systems actually worked well and was engaging. This is just a watered down version with none of the upgrade features in it at all. Really, really poor. If the level progression and the size of Stalingrad didn't already make zombies really easy, some of the overpowered weapons and perks make sure of it. Shotguns are pretty ridiculous in Vanguard overall, but are exceptional in Duranfang. More specifically the combat shotgun, which can seemingly one-shot any zombie, no questions asked. Adding the Death Blow Covenant to this, you're struggling to get downed. That being said though, aside from Death Blow, the Covenants are pretty much useless. Sure, they help you a little bit here and there, but you really won't notice much of a difference if you never touch them. Whilst on the topic of the mode being easy, Being able to rank up every perk 4 times will have you near enough invincible regardless of what weapons you're using, or if you bought any armor. Also, the points progression system carried on the same line as Cold War, where you only get points for eliminations and critical eliminations, except instead of 90 and 115 points, you now get 20 for a standard elim and 30 for a critical. This makes it so much more of a grind to get essence, and now just feels like you're shooting zombies for hours and hours with no real reward. On top of that, the Pack-a-Punch now costs 7,500 for tier 1, 15,000 for tier 2, and 30,000 for tier 3, meaning you're going to have to spend hours shooting zombies just to upgrade. They do however give you random drops of Pack-a-Punch guns, so what's the point in any of this? In terms of a storyline, there really isn't much to report. Zombies up until now has had a deep and intricate narrative the whole way through, but seeing as that Anfang translates to the beginning, I wouldn't write it off just yet. But overall, this game mode is shocking. It's taken so many challenges out of the zombies games that we all loved, and as I said at the start of the section, just feels like it's an arcade game that we put $1 into to continue, except that dollar is actually $80. Thanks, Sledgehammer. The game actually released with 16 multiplayer maps, which is definitely a positive, as the more recent CODs have launched with a disappointing amount of 10 for both Cold War and Modern Warfare. Some of them could be great, but the new addition of destructible scenery actually ruins the flow of them completely. There are too many camping spots and angles to be shot from, and you can see players' name tags as giant red diamonds above their head through tiny gaps. You'll often find yourself aiming at players' names rather than their bodies, which you can't actually see due to poor colours and lighting. Speaking of ruining the flow of maps, the squad spawn system in Vanguard only adds to this. Considering some of the maps are pretty sizable, players should not be spawning on top of each other mid-game. Just look at this clip from Aiden and it will tell you everything. The game is also launched without a ranked mode, which is baffling to be honest, given the absolutely huge competitive scene around the game. With there being a pro Call of Duty League which has a $25 million buy-in for each team that launched just 2 years ago, you'd think they'd have put at least some form of ranked playlist in at launch. This clearly hasn't been the priority for years, as Modern Warfare never had a ranked mode and Cold War only had a pretty terrible version that was released halfway through the year. Though it was a COVID hit year, so we are willing to cut them a little bit of slack, but not too much. It has been confirmed that there will be a ranked mode in Vanguard however, which will please fans, but it should have been in from the start. At least we got the new game mode Champion Hill though, that was fun to play. In the alpha. Has anyone played this since? With the amount of attachment slots for each gun being increased to 10 instead of 5, it does feel like you can make any gun extremely good. The TTKs in previous COD have always varied, with it being extremely fast in some of the most popular titles. Vanguard however is on its own level. Being able to add hollow point rounds to your gun also allows you to do more damage per shot to the limbs. Why? Which, combined with the vital proficiency, means that any player can get an insane TTK on almost any gun. No one wanted a decent skill gap anyway, right? The lack of a decent skill gap has actually been an issue for a while, especially amongst the pros, which has seen some of the smaller pros and streamers moving over to Halo Infinite. It also doesn't help that the game just isn't fun. Not having any trophy systems in multiplayer means that grenades are out of hand. Mix that with stun grenades now doing 20 damage instead of 1, and that makes for some miserable gameplay. Small changes like gunfire being invisible on the radar regardless of using a suppressor adds to the misery also. You can use the perk radar which shows the unsuppressed fire on the minimap, but in previous CODs it was just part and parcel of the game. In terms of other perks to use, practically all of the good ones are in the first slot, with both Ghost and Cold Blooded appearing in there. Not good for balanced classes at all. Matchmaking this year is based off of EOMM, which stands for Engagement Optimized Matchmaking, which in short will put you in either a really easy lobby or a really hard one. This is designed to make you carry on playing as you're constantly getting that high and then that low, which is pretty addictive. What I will say for Vanguard though is that the movement mechanics are really nice. Based off of the hugely popular Modern Warfare engine, flying around the map is actually really smooth, and actually does add some more skill back into the game that the TTK had eliminated. Overall, the multiplayer feels a bit lost. It doesn't know whether to target the casual player or focus on the competitive scene. It's actually doing neither, and it's driving players away. I think the problem with gaming these days is that microtransactions are making companies so much money. They'd rather cash in as much as possible on that than make a well-balanced game. Most of these companies are yet to find a balance and it's killing the consumer's desire to play. Let's hope it all gets figured out soon. Out of the 3 game modes, you'd have to say that Campaign is probably the best, which doesn't exactly put the game in a good light seeing as it's only a 6-hour experience and is miles off being perfect. It feels like since Cold War struggled to transfer over to Warzone, Vanguard has been made with the ease of integration in mind. Almost like a very expensive DLC that no one wants to play. Not a very good look. Even things like the camo grind is a bit pointless now, due to most of the nicest camos being locked behind paywalls. Warzone really is a double-edged sword in that regard. On one hand, it's completely revamped COD and introduced a ton of old players back to the game, but it's also causing Vanguard's multiplayer to suffer a lot, which the more hardcore fans of the franchise will be disappointed with. As for Campaign, I just believe it was a pretty standard one for COD. But zombies? Well, we won't get back into that. If I were to give you my honest opinion on whether you should buy this game, it's no. Don't spend your hard-earned $80 on DLC. Perhaps wait a few months and pick it up if they release a ton of new features and content in the upcoming seasons. Don't worry though, if you don't like Vanguard, you can just wait for the eagerly anticipated remaster of Modern Warfare 2. Wait, it's not a remaster? It's a different game with the exact same name. Oh, so that's it. Let us know your feelings towards the game in the comments below. I imagine there will be a lot of mixed opinions, so please feel free to start a discussion. Once again, if you could subscribe to the channel, it would mean a lot. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.